Your soulmate wants clarity because silence is giving them nothing to hold on, and don't scroll away right now, because this message only makes sense if you stay with it from the beginning. There is a reason these words are landing in front of you at this exact moment. Somewhere, the person connected to you in a way that goes beyond routine, comfort, or habit is realizing that silence is no longer protecting them. Silence has stopped feeling neutral. It has started to feel empty. And emptiness is harder to live with than truth. Listen to this carefully, because this isn't about impatience or pressure. Your soulmate isn't craving drama or reassurance. They're craving something much simpler and much harder at the same time: clarity. Silence used to feel like space, like time to think, like a pause that would somehow resolve itself. But now, silence feels like nothing to hold on to. No direction. No grounding. No understanding of where they stand with you or within themselves. Stay right here, because this explains why their energy has shifted even if their words haven't yet. They're noticing that without clarity, their thoughts keep looping. Not in a chaotic way, but in a tired way. They replay moments, not to romanticize them, but to find meaning. They're asking themselves what was real, what was assumed, and what was left unsaid. And the more they sit with that, the clearer it becomes that silence isn't giving them answers anymore. It's only deepening the questions. Don't skip this part, because it's deeply human. Silence can feel safe when you're unsure of yourself. It buys time. It avoids risk. But it also avoids connection. And your soulmate has reached a point where avoiding connection feels worse than risking honesty. They're realizing that without clarity, they can't orient themselves emotionally. They can't move forward, and they can't truly let go either. Silence has left them suspended, and suspension is exhausting. Listen closely, because this is where their need for clarity really comes from. It's not about controlling the outcome. It's not about forcing a conversation to go a certain way. It's about needing something real to hold on to. A truth. A direction. Even an ending, if that's what's honest. Anything feels better than standing in emotional fog with nothing solid beneath their feet. Stay with me here, because you may recognize this feeling too. You might have experienced a time in your life where silence felt heavier than words ever could. Where not knowing became more painful than knowing something difficult. That's where your soulmate is now. They're not asking for perfection. They're asking for reality. Don't scroll away, because this part explains why they haven't spoken yet even though they want clarity. Wanting clarity and being ready to handle it are two different things. They're still gathering the courage to face whatever truth comes with that clarity. They know that once silence breaks, things will shift. They're preparing themselves to accept that shift without running from it. Listen to this gently. Your soulmate isn't blaming you for the silence. They're looking inward. They're realizing how much they relied on silence to avoid feeling vulnerable. How they told themselves that waiting was easier than risking rejection or discomfort. But now, waiting feels like standing still in a life that wants to move. Stay right here, because this is where your role becomes clearer without you doing anything at all. You don't feel frantic. You're not desperate for answers. There's a calm awareness in you. That calm isn't indifference. It's strength. You've learned how to live without forcing clarity, and that has grounded you. But your soulmate is just learning this lesson now, from the other side. Don't skip this, because it explains why they're feeling pulled toward honesty. Silence used to give them an illusion of control. They could avoid making a choice. Avoid committing to a direction. But control without connection eventually feels hollow. And now they want something real, even if it's uncomfortable. Listen closely here. They're not just thinking about what they want to say to you. They're thinking about what they want to stand for. About whether they want to keep living in avoidance or step into honesty. This is bigger than a conversation. It's about how they choose to show up in their life. Stay with this thought. Your soulmate is also realizing that silence has consequences. Not dramatic ones, but subtle ones. It erodes understanding. It creates distance that words later struggle to bridge. It leaves too much room for interpretation. And interpretation, without clarity, often turns into doubt. Don't scroll yet, because this is important for your peace. If you've been feeling moments of quiet emotional release lately, moments where you breathe deeper or feel lighter without knowing why, that's because the dynamic has already shifted internally. You're no longer holding the weight of unspoken questions alone. Something is balancing out. Listen carefully, because clarity doesn't always mean continuation. And that's something your soulmate is coming to terms with. They're realizing that clarity might bring them closer to you, or it might give them the understanding they need to move forward differently. Either way, clarity is kinder than silence. Clarity allows healing. Silence prolongs confusion. Stay right here, because this part is about boundaries. Yours have become clearer. You know what you deserve now. Not in an aggressive way, but in a settled way. Your soulmate can feel that. They know they can't keep floating in uncertainty and expect the connection to remain unchanged. Whatever clarity comes, it has to meet the version of you that exists now, not the one who once waited quietly. Don't skip this, because fear is still present for them. Fear of hearing something they're not ready for. Fear of saying something they can't take back. Fear of realizing how much they need clarity once they admit they want it. But this fear isn't stopping them anymore. It's slowing them down so they approach this honestly. Listen to this slowly. You don't need to do anything to create this moment. You don't need to push for clarity or avoid it. The need for clarity is arising naturally on their side because silence has stopped serving its purpose. When silence gives nothing to hold on to, truth becomes the only anchor left. Stay present, because the universe is quiet right now for a reason. The signs aren't loud. The nudges aren't constant. That's because awareness has already been delivered. The rest is choice. And choice is powerful because it's voluntary. Don't scroll away, because this is the heart of it. Your soulmate doesn't want clarity to control the connection. They want clarity to understand it. To know where they stand. To stop guessing. To stop carrying uncertainty alone. That desire comes from maturity, not neediness. Listen carefully. You're not dependent on what clarity brings to feel whole. You already are. That's why you can stay calm while they're feeling the weight of silence. That calm is not coldness. It's self-trust. And self-trust allows you to meet clarity without fear. Stay right here for this final part. Whether clarity arrives as a conversation, a realization, or a quiet resolution, it will change things. Not violently. Not chaotically. But honestly. And honesty always clears space, even when it's difficult. Something important is shifting. Silence has stopped being neutral for your soulmate. It has become empty. And emptiness is what pushes people toward truth. Whatever truth arrives next will come because someone finally chose clarity over comfort. Let yourself breathe into that. Let yourself stay grounded. You don't need to anticipate the outcome. The need for clarity has already started doing its work. And whatever comes next will be shaped by honesty, not avoidance. Stay present. Stay open. And trust that clarity, when it arrives, will bring understanding where silence could only bring questions. Don't scroll away right now, because this is the part where you understand why the silence stopped working for them in the first place. Your soulmate didn't wake up one day suddenly craving clarity. This need grew slowly, quietly, over time, until silence became something they could no longer lean on. At first, silence felt like space. Like breathing room. Like something that would sort itself out if they just waited long enough. But now, silence feels empty in their hands. And emptiness is unsettling when your heart is involved. Listen to this carefully, because this isn't about impatience. It's about orientation. Your soulmate has reached a point where they don't know where they stand anymore, and not knowing has started to affect them more than they expected. Without clarity, they don't know how to move forward emotionally. They don't know whether to hold on, let go, or stand still. Silence has taken away direction, and human beings aren't built to live long without direction when something meaningful is involved. Stay right here, because this explains why their thoughts keep circling back to you. It's not obsession. It's grounding. When nothing is clear, the mind searches for something familiar, something real, something that once made sense. You represent that for them. Not as a solution, but as a reference point. And without clarity, even that reference point feels unstable. Don't skip this part, because it's deeply human. Your soulmate is realizing that silence doesn't actually preserve peace. It just delays discomfort. And delayed discomfort often grows heavier than discomfort faced directly. The questions they avoided didn't disappear. They multiplied. And now they're sitting with too many unanswered things and nothing solid to hold on to. Listen closely here. They're not angry about the silence. They're tired of it. Tired of guessing. Tired of replaying conversations in their head and wondering what they meant. Tired of filling in gaps with assumptions. Silence has forced them to imagine too much, and imagination without clarity can slowly erode emotional stability. Stay with me, because you may recognize parts of this in yourself too. There may have been a time when you also wanted clarity, when not knowing felt heavier than knowing something difficult. The difference is, you learned how to ground yourself without it. Your soulmate is only now learning that lesson, from the other side. Don't scroll yet, because this explains why their desire for clarity feels urgent to them but calm to you. You've already done the work of stabilizing yourself internally. They're just beginning that process. Silence is teaching them something it already taught you, that peace doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from honesty, even when honesty is uncomfortable. Listen to this gently. Your soulmate is starting to understand that clarity isn't about forcing an outcome. It's about understanding reality. They don't need everything to go a certain way. They just need something real to stand on. A truth. A boundary. A direction. Anything feels better than floating in uncertainty. Stay right here, because fear is still present for them, but it has shifted. It's no longer fear of speaking. It's fear of staying silent and losing themselves in the process. They're realizing that silence is costing them emotional energy. It's making them feel disconnected not just from you, but from their own feelings. Don't skip this part, because it explains why they're reflecting so deeply now. They're asking themselves hard questions. Not dramatic ones, but honest ones. What am I avoiding? What am I afraid to know? What would happen if I stopped hiding behind silence? These questions don't come from weakness. They come from growth. Listen closely. They're also realizing that silence leaves too much room for misinterpretation. Without clarity, they don't know if you're okay, if you've moved on, if you're waiting, or if you're protecting yourself. And not knowing creates distance even when feelings still exist. Clarity, even difficult clarity, at least creates understanding. Stay with this thought. Your soulmate doesn't want clarity to trap you or bind you. They want clarity to free themselves from mental loops. To stop wondering what if. To stop filling in blanks with fear or hope. They want something real, even if that reality forces them to adjust. Don't scroll away, because this part is important for your role in all of this. You don't feel pulled to demand clarity. You don't feel the urge to break the silence just to ease discomfort. That's because you've already found grounding within yourself. You know that your worth isn't dependent on answers. That calm isn't coldness. It's strength. Listen to this carefully. Your soulmate can feel that strength. They sense that you're not waiting helplessly. You're standing on your own emotional feet. And paradoxically, that makes clarity feel safer to approach. When someone knows they won't be responsible for holding your entire emotional world together, honesty becomes less terrifying. Stay right here, because this is where silence finally loses its power. Silence works only as long as it offers protection. Once it offers nothing to hold on to, it becomes a void. And humans instinctively move away from voids. Toward meaning. Toward truth. Toward clarity. Don't skip this, because this is where responsibility enters. Your soulmate is realizing that clarity requires ownership. Ownership of feelings. Ownership of actions. Ownership of the impact silence had. That level of responsibility is intimidating, but it's also grounding. It gives them a way forward instead of keeping them stuck. Listen closely here. They're not looking for clarity to rewrite the past. They're looking for clarity to understand it. To stop wondering whether things mattered as much as they felt they did. To stop questioning their own emotions. Silence made everything feel ambiguous. Clarity promises definition. Stay with this, because definition doesn't always mean continuation. Sometimes it means closure. And your soulmate is slowly accepting that either outcome is better than endless uncertainty. Clarity allows healing. Silence keeps wounds open by never acknowledging them. Don't scroll yet, because this part explains why the universe feels quiet now. The signs aren't loud anymore. The nudges aren't constant. That's because awareness has already been delivered. The lesson of silence has been learned. What remains is choice. And choice belongs to the human heart, not fate. Listen carefully. You're not responsible for pushing this clarity into existence. You don't need to prepare speeches or anticipate outcomes. Whatever clarity arrives will arrive because silence stopped being enough for them. Not because you demanded it. Stay present for this. When clarity does come, it may arrive gently. A conversation that feels grounded. A realization that settles without drama. Or even a quiet understanding that doesn't require many words. Clarity doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply replaces confusion with peace. Don't skip this final understanding. Your soulmate wanting clarity doesn't mean they're trying to disrupt your peace. It means they're trying to regain their own. Silence gave them nothing to hold on to, and human beings need something real when emotions are involved. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not missing anything. You're simply standing in a place of calm while someone else catches up to the truth you already learned. And that truth is this. Clarity, in whatever form it takes, is always kinder than silence that leads nowhere. Stay grounded. Stay open. And trust that whatever clarity arrives will arrive because someone finally chose truth over avoidance. Don't scroll away now, because this is the part where the need for clarity stops being an idea and starts becoming an emotional necessity for them. Your soulmate isn't just uncomfortable with silence anymore. Silence has begun to feel like standing on ground that's slowly giving way beneath their feet. At first, they told themselves they could manage it. That time would smooth things out. That answers would come on their own. But now, silence feels like nothing to grab onto, nothing to steady themselves with, and that absence has started to weigh on them in a very real way. Listen to this carefully, because this stage isn't about urgency, it's about stability. Human beings need some kind of emotional reference point when something meaningful is involved. Without clarity, your soulmate feels unanchored. They don't know if they're holding on to something real or just holding on to hope. And that uncertainty doesn't just stay in their mind. It seeps into their body. Into their sleep. Into their focus. Into the quiet moments when there's nothing left to distract them. Stay right here, because this explains why they're feeling restless in a way they didn't expect. Not frantic. Not dramatic. Just unsettled. They might go about their day normally, but underneath, there's a constant low-level tension. Silence doesn't answer questions. It amplifies them. And when questions pile up with no direction, even the strongest people start craving something solid. Don't skip this part, because it's deeply human. Your soulmate is realizing that clarity isn't about getting what they want. It's about understanding what is. They don't need reassurance wrapped in promises. They don't need dramatic declarations. They need truth. Even if that truth is complicated. Even if it forces them to adjust. Even if it hurts a little at first. Anything feels better than standing in emotional fog with no edges. Listen closely here. They're starting to notice how silence has affected their sense of self. Without clarity, they've been questioning their own feelings. Wondering if they imagined the depth of the connection. Wondering if they misunderstood moments that felt real to them at the time. Silence doesn't just leave space. It erodes confidence when it stretches on too long. Stay with me, because this is where things become very personal for them. They're not just wondering where things stand with you. They're wondering where they stand with themselves. Whether they're the kind of person who avoids hard truths or faces them. Whether they want to keep living in emotional ambiguity or step into honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Don't scroll yet, because this explains why the desire for clarity feels heavier now than before. Earlier, silence felt like a pause. Now it feels like avoidance. And once someone recognizes avoidance for what it is, they can't unsee it. They start noticing all the places in their life where they've chosen quiet over courage. And that realization has a way of spreading. Listen to this gently. Your soulmate is not angry at you. They're not resentful. They're introspective. They're realizing that silence gave them an illusion of safety, but it also kept them stuck. It allowed them to avoid choosing. And choosing is scary, because it means accepting consequences. But not choosing has consequences too, and they're feeling those now. Stay right here, because this part matters for your understanding. You might notice that you don't feel the same desperation for clarity that they do. That's because you've already done some of this emotional work. You've learned how to ground yourself without answers. You've learned how to sit with uncertainty without letting it define you. Your soulmate is just now reaching that crossroads from the other side. Don't skip this, because this difference in where you both stand emotionally doesn't mean you're disconnected. It means you're at different points in the same lesson. Silence taught you how to find stability within yourself. Silence is now teaching them that stability can't come from avoidance. Listen closely here. They're beginning to understand that clarity doesn't have to mean resolution in the way people expect. It doesn't have to tie everything up neatly. Sometimes clarity simply means naming what exists. Acknowledging feelings. Defining boundaries. Understanding whether something is open, closed, or somewhere in between. That definition alone can bring relief. Stay with this thought. Your soulmate is tired of guessing. Tired of interpreting small things. Tired of wondering if silence means protection, distance, or indifference. Without clarity, every interpretation feels possible, and that's exhausting. Clarity narrows the field. It gives the mind something to rest on. Don't scroll away, because this is where fear shifts into resolve. They're still afraid, but it's no longer fear of speaking. It's fear of staying silent and losing themselves in the process. They're realizing that silence is costing them emotional energy they can't keep spending. And when something starts costing more than it gives, people naturally start looking for another way. Listen carefully, because this is where responsibility comes in. Your soulmate is starting to accept that clarity requires ownership. Ownership of their feelings. Ownership of their silence. Ownership of the impact that silence may have had. That's not an easy place to stand. But it's a grounded one. Responsibility gives direction. Silence without responsibility just floats. Stay right here, because this also explains why they're reflecting so deeply on the past. Not to relive it, but to understand it. They're asking themselves what was real, what was assumed, and what was left open-ended. They're trying to separate memory from meaning. Silence blurred those lines. Clarity promises to sharpen them. Don't skip this part, because it's important. Your soulmate is also realizing that clarity might change things permanently. And that's scary. Once something is named, it can't be unnamed. Once a truth is spoken, it can't be unheard. But they're starting to understand that living with truth is still lighter than living with endless uncertainty. Listen to this slowly. You don't need to do anything to create this shift. You don't need to reach out or withdraw. The need for clarity is arising organically within them because silence stopped serving its purpose. When silence gives nothing to hold on to, people naturally reach for truth. Stay present, because this is about choice now. Not fate. Not signs. Choice. Your soulmate isn't being pushed toward clarity. They're choosing it because they want something real to stand on. And choices made from that place tend to be honest, even if they're imperfect. Don't scroll yet, because this is where your strength matters. Your calm, your grounding, your ability to sit with uncertainty has created a safe emotional space. Your soulmate can feel that you're not waiting helplessly. You're standing on your own. That makes clarity feel less threatening. It means honesty won't break you. Listen closely, because clarity doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives as a simple conversation. Sometimes as a quiet acknowledgement. Sometimes as an internal realization that doesn't even need to be spoken. But however it arrives, it changes the emotional landscape. It replaces fog with shape. Stay with this understanding. Your soulmate wanting clarity doesn't mean they're trying to rush you or pressure the connection. It means they're trying to regain their footing. Silence gave them nothing to hold on to, and human beings need something real when emotions are involved. Don't skip this final part. Whatever clarity comes next will come because someone finally chose honesty over avoidance. And honesty, even when it's difficult, always creates more peace than silence that leads nowhere. Stay grounded. Stay open. And trust that clarity, when it arrives, will bring understanding where silence could only bring questions. Don't scroll away right now, because this is the part where the need for clarity becomes impossible for them to ignore any longer. Your soulmate isn't just uncomfortable with silence anymore. Silence has begun to feel like standing in the dark without walls, without direction, without anything solid to lean on. What once felt like space now feels like absence. And absence, when emotions are involved, slowly turns into unrest. Listen to this carefully, because this didn't happen overnight. At first, they told themselves silence was mature. That giving things time was respectful. That not pushing was the right thing to do. And for a while, that belief worked. It helped them avoid hard questions. It helped them postpone decisions. But now, silence has stopped offering relief. It has started demanding answers. Stay right here, because this explains why their inner world feels louder even though nothing has been said out loud. When clarity is missing, the mind fills in the gaps. Over and over again. They replay moments, not because they want to live in the past, but because the present doesn't give them anything solid to stand on. Silence leaves too much room for interpretation, and interpretation slowly turns into emotional exhaustion. Don't skip this part, because it's deeply human. Your soulmate is realizing that silence doesn't freeze emotions in place. It changes them. It distorts them. Without clarity, feelings don't stay still. They either grow heavier or start fading into doubt. And right now, they're scared of both. Scared of holding on to something that might not exist anymore, and scared of letting go of something that still feels real. Listen closely here. They're not blaming you for the silence. They're looking inward. They're recognizing how often they've used silence as a shield. How it helped them avoid vulnerability. How it allowed them to stay uncommitted while still emotionally invested. But now that shield feels thin. It's not protecting them anymore. It's isolating them. Stay with me, because this is where the craving for clarity becomes emotional, not intellectual. They don't want answers just to know. They want answers to feel grounded again. To stop floating between hope and doubt. To stop waking up with questions they can't quiet. Silence has taken away their sense of emotional orientation, and humans aren't built to live without orientation for long. Don't scroll yet, because this explains why they feel torn. On one side, they fear clarity because it might bring a truth they're not ready to face. On the other side, they fear silence even more because it keeps them suspended. And being suspended hurts in a slow, quiet way. It drains energy. It erodes confidence. It makes even simple moments feel heavy. Listen to this gently. Your soulmate is realizing that clarity doesn't have to mean a perfect outcome. It doesn't have to mean resolution in the way people imagine. It just has to mean honesty. Naming what exists. Acknowledging what's real. Even if that reality is messy. Even if it requires change. Silence, by contrast, keeps everything undefined. And undefined emotions don't heal. Stay right here, because this part explains why you may feel calmer than they do. You've already learned how to ground yourself without clarity. You learned how to live your life without waiting on answers that might not come. That growth didn't come easily, but it gave you stability. Your soulmate is just now realizing what you already learned, that silence doesn't equal peace. Peace comes from truth. Don't skip this, because the difference between where you stand and where they stand doesn't mean you're disconnected. It means you're at different stages of the same lesson. You found stability by turning inward. They're finding instability by avoiding the same turn. And now, they're ready to face it. Listen closely, because fear is still part of this stage. But it's changed shape. It's no longer fear of saying the wrong thing. It's fear of never saying anything and losing themselves in the process. They're realizing that silence has cost them emotional clarity, self-trust, and a sense of direction. And those are things they want back. Stay with this thought. Your soulmate is asking themselves questions that don't have easy answers. Am I avoiding clarity because I'm afraid of the truth? Or because I don't want to disrupt the peace? But now they see that silence hasn't preserved peace. It's created tension instead. Quiet tension, but tension all the same. Don't scroll away, because this is where responsibility becomes unavoidable. Clarity requires ownership. Ownership of feelings. Ownership of past silence. ownership of the impact that silence had. They're realizing that without clarity, they can't take responsibility, and without responsibility, nothing actually moves forward. Listen carefully here. They're also beginning to understand that clarity isn't something you demand from someone else. It's something you step into yourself. It means being willing to say, "This is what I feel," even if the response is uncertain. Silence kept them from risking rejection. Clarity requires courage. Stay right here, because this is important for your peace. You don't need to push for this clarity. You don't need to break the silence yourself. The need for clarity is arising naturally on their side because silence has stopped giving them anything to hold on to. When silence becomes empty, truth becomes the only anchor left. Don't skip this part, because this is where grief enters quietly. Grief for time spent in uncertainty. For conversations that didn't happen sooner. For moments that could have been clearer. This grief isn't dramatic. It's reflective. It's the kind of grief that comes when you realize you've been standing still for too long. Listen gently. You may feel echoes of this grief yourself. A quiet heaviness. A deep breath that comes out of nowhere. That doesn't mean you're regressing. It means you're acknowledging something honestly. Acknowledgement is part of closure or renewal. Stay with me, because this is where the universe steps back. The signs don't need to shout anymore. Awareness has landed. The lesson of silence has been learned. What remains is choice. And choice always belongs to the human heart. Don't scroll yet, because clarity doesn't always arrive the way people expect. It may arrive as a conversation. It may arrive as a realization. It may arrive as a boundary that finally becomes clear without many words. But however it arrives, it replaces confusion with understanding. And understanding is what your soulmate is craving now. Listen closely. Your soulmate doesn't want clarity to trap you or bind you. They want clarity to stop guessing. To stop interpreting. To stop living in emotional fog. They want something real, even if that reality forces change. Stay right here for this final understanding. Silence stopped giving them anything to hold on to, and that's why clarity matters now. Not to rush the connection. Not to force an outcome. But to regain emotional footing. Whatever clarity comes next will come because someone chose honesty over avoidance. And honesty, even when it's difficult, always creates more peace than silence that leads nowhere. Don't scroll away now, because this is the part where everything your soulmate has been feeling finally reaches a breaking point in the quietest, most human way. Not an explosion. Not a dramatic confession. But a deep internal understanding that silence is no longer neutral. Silence is no longer safe. Silence has stopped offering anything to lean on, and when that happens, the heart naturally starts reaching for clarity as a form of survival, not desire. Listen to this carefully, because your soulmate didn't arrive here suddenly. They didn't wake up one morning and decide silence was a problem. This realization built slowly, layer by layer. At first, silence felt like patience. Like maturity. Like giving things time to breathe. Then it started feeling like distance. And now, it feels like absence. And absence, when love or deep connection is involved, creates a hollow space that grows louder the longer it's ignored. Stay right here, because this explains why they feel more tired than emotional lately. It's not heartbreak in the dramatic sense. It's emotional fatigue. The kind that comes from holding too many unanswered questions for too long. From waking up each day without knowing whether to open their heart or close it. From carrying feelings without knowing where to place them. Silence doesn't resolve emotion. It suspends it. And suspension drains people quietly. Don't skip this part, because it's important to understand how deeply this has affected them. Your soulmate has started questioning not just the connection, but themselves. Not in a self-critical way, but in an honest one. They're asking, why am I still here emotionally? What am I holding on to? What am I afraid to know? Silence leaves room for these questions, but it doesn't answer them. And unanswered questions eventually demand truth. Listen closely here. They're not angry at you. They're not resentful. They're inward. Reflective. They're realizing that silence kept them from having to choose, and not choosing felt easier for a long time. But now, not choosing feels like slowly disappearing from their own life. Clarity represents existence. Silence feels like fading. Stay with me, because this is where the need for clarity becomes deeply personal. It's no longer about the relationship or connection alone. It's about self-respect. About knowing where they stand so they can stop betraying their own feelings by pretending uncertainty doesn't hurt. Clarity is becoming less about outcome and more about integrity. Don't scroll yet, because this part matters for you too. You may notice that you're not feeling the same urgency they are. You're calmer. More grounded. That doesn't mean you care less. It means you learned how to stand without leaning on answers. You built stability inside yourself while they were still hoping silence would resolve things externally. Now, they're learning the same lesson, but later, and from the other side. Listen gently. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that silence didn't protect the connection. It protected their comfort. And comfort, when it avoids truth, eventually becomes a cage. They're realizing that clarity might be uncomfortable, but at least it allows movement. Silence keeps them frozen. Stay right here, because this explains why they're feeling pulled toward honesty even though it scares them. Honesty doesn't guarantee a happy outcome. They know that. But silence guarantees stagnation. And stagnation feels unbearable now. They'd rather face something real than keep living in emotional limbo. Don't skip this, because fear is still present, but it has changed. It's no longer fear of speaking. It's fear of continuing to disappear into silence. Fear of looking back one day and realizing they never stood up for what they felt. That kind of fear pushes people toward truth, even when their voice shakes. Listen carefully. Your soulmate is also realizing that clarity doesn't have to be dramatic. It doesn't require a perfect conversation or the right words. It simply requires naming reality. Saying, "This matters to me," or "I need to know where we stand," or even, "I can't keep pretending silence doesn't affect me." Those statements aren't demands. They're acknowledgments. Stay present, because this is where responsibility fully settles in. They understand now that wanting clarity means being willing to accept whatever clarity brings. Not just the answers they hope for, but the answers that are real. That acceptance is new for them. It's uncomfortable. But it's also grounding. It gives them back a sense of agency. Don't scroll away, because this part is subtle but important. Your soulmate isn't trying to pull you toward them or push you away. They're trying to stop floating. Silence made them feel like they were drifting without direction. Clarity feels like solid ground, even if that ground requires adjustment. Listen to this slowly. You don't need to do anything to create this moment. You don't need to reach out first. You don't need to break the silence yourself. The need for clarity is rising on its own because silence stopped feeding them anything. When something stops sustaining you emotionally, you naturally look for what will. Stay right here, because grief is also finishing its work now. Grief for time spent waiting. For conversations that didn't happen sooner. For feelings that stayed unspoken. This grief isn't loud. It's reflective. It shows up as deep breaths, long pauses, and quiet realizations. It's the grief that clears the way for honesty. Don't skip this, because you may feel this grief too, in a different form. Not sadness, but release. Like something loosening inside you. That's not loss. That's resolution approaching. Even before words arrive, emotional knots begin to untie. Listen closely, because the universe is quiet now for a reason. There are no loud signs. No constant reminders. Awareness has already landed. The lesson of silence has been fully learned. What comes next is no longer about guidance. It's about choice. Stay with this understanding. Whatever clarity arrives next will arrive because someone chose truth over avoidance. Because silence finally gave them nothing to hold on to. And when silence becomes empty, honesty becomes the only anchor left. Don't scroll away yet, because this is the final truth of this phase. Your soulmate doesn't want clarity to rush the connection. They want clarity to understand it. To stop guessing. To stop carrying uncertainty alone. To stand in something real, even if that reality requires courage. Listen carefully now. You are not behind. You are not missing out. You are not powerless in this. You're grounded. You're aware. You're steady. That steadiness is why you can allow clarity to come without fear. Stay present. Stay open. And trust that whatever clarity arrives will arrive because silence has done all it can do. And what comes after silence, when chosen honestly, is always truth. This isn't the end. It's the moment before understanding finally takes shape.